A suburban lifestyle can get a little boring. Similar-looking houses. The tranquility of the streets seemed to not be affected by anything other than an occasional car horn. Kids playing soccer in the front yard. But no binge drinking at 2 in the morning, going to a gala at an art gallery or clubbing at a discounted music venue. As a man in his early 30s, I reckoned it was time to settle down when I inherited a small house in the suburban area from my grandparents. I was not complaining. I was sick of living paycheck to paycheck, unable to juggle between paying for rent or saving up. But this new life was also a little boring, to say the least. I was craving something interesting in my life. Some spark. That was it. That's when I noticed a young couple that recently moved in. Their house was right across from mine. They didn't seem anything out of ordinary. They kept it to themselves and did not seem to bother anyone else. To be fair, I barely interacted with any of them, which meant that I had no idea what they were really like. But they were young, and it was rather rare to see homeowners so young in my neighborhood. I had millions of questions. What was their reason for staying here? What did they do for work? Did they have kids? I decided I would try befriending them if I could. Get to know more about my neighbors. That seemed to align with my idea of having a little spark in my life. Slow but steady. That was it. It was a Friday evening. I walked over to their front porch. It was a standard house with standard decoration. There was a minimalistic mat in front of the door that read, "Have a good day." Nothing out of the ordinary, as I said. I heard shuffling within the house. They must be organizing their new furniture or sweeping the floor. I thought nonchalantly. "Hello, is anyone there?" I knocked on the door. A pause. There was silence, but it was a silence that felt a little strange to me. I did not hear a voice or anything. Not a "Hey, can you go check the door?" Just an abrupt silence. It was as if whoever was inside paused what they were doing immediately and was waiting. Waiting for what? "I am your neighbor, Steve." I wanted to introduce myself. I paused for a minute. I knew someone was in there. Something did not feel too right, but I internally laughed at myself. A lot of people make it seem like they are not at home when strangers come in front of their house. It was perfectly normal. I decided to count to 10 and then leave when I heard the doorknob turn. "Hi, Steve. Nice to meet you." A perfectly ordinary-looking man in his early 30s greeted me with a smile. He had a buzz cut that was a little too short and was wearing a pair of round glasses that was crooked on one end. He looked very calm, as if there was nothing that happened beforehand, and he merely stood up after sitting on a sofa. "My name is also Steve. How's it going?" "Wow, same name." "Doing good. Just wanted to swing by and introduce myself. It's fairly rare to see someone so young move into this neighborhood." Yes, that is true. That is true." The neighbor smiled, but I was not sure if he wanted to continue on with this topic or not. "Hey, I was wondering, are you free tomorrow evening? I want to invite you two over for dinner at my place. I thought it would be fun. With some alcohol too." I winked. I don't know why I winked, but I guess I wanted to keep the mood a little lighthearted. It felt a little tense. The other Steve was staring at me very intently. He was so calm just a minute ago. What was he on about? "Of course, Steve." The neighbor spoke. There was a pause of about 10 seconds. I did not know whether to stare at him back or look at the ground. "But we don't want you to prepare all the food. How about a potluck? We will bring some food and we can all share. Do you have any dietary restrictions? Any meat that you avoid eating?" "I like all kinds of food, Steve." "I would appreciate it." "That's perfect." The neighbor smiled, showing his perfectly white, pearly teeth. "We will see you tomorrow. It was nice meeting you, Steve." "Same goes for you." I walked back to my house, unsure whether it was a good interaction or not. The other Steve was definitely polite, but there was something a little uncanny about him that he could not put a finger on. Maybe it was his stare. The intensity of it made it unreal. I shook my head. I was bothered by the smallest things. Meditation, journaling. I needed to stop watching horror movies in my free time. Binging Get Out the day before was definitely not a good idea. That night, I was tumbling around the bed, unable to sleep. I was thinking about a lot of things. My career, my mundane life, yada yada. But I was also thinking about the interaction I had with the other Steve just earlier. I was wondering to myself if it was the right decision to invite him over for dinner. I stood up and looked over the window. The neighbor's house was bright, as if all the lights were turned on. I looked at the clock. It was 3 in the morning. All the other houses in the vicinity were dark as usual. Then, momentarily, all the lights turned off. Stillness. The night continued on. Welcome, welcome. I prepared some pork chops with mashed potato and arugula salad. I placed the dishes on the dinner table. Steve and his wife were at the front door. Steve's wife looked like a typical woman in her early 30s. She was wearing a black overcoat with a red turtleneck underneath. Her slim hands were covered in white gloves that almost resembled surgical gloves. Fashion trends nowadays can be so subtle, I thought. She was not wearing any glasses, but her look was oddly similar to her husband's. They both looked like medical professionals, but without the warmth of a family doctor. You can keep the shoes on. I don't mind. The couple smiled at me and entered the house. Hello, my name is Steve. Nice to meet you. Instead of shaking my hand, the wife smiled again and nodded. She is a little quiet. Don't mind her. Here, we brought some food. From a side bag, the other Steve took out 3 black plastic containers. He laid them out on the dinner table, ever so gently, to the point where I wondered if there was jewelry inside. Once they were on the table, the neighbor stood there quietly, looking at the containers with a smile indicating how proud he was. Proud of what? Do you want to eat or have a glass of wine first? I have some vintage wine you might want to try. Here, take a look. As I was walking to the wine cellar, I felt a gaze behind me. I looked back. No, that's fine. Let's eat first. You must be famished, the other Steve said. The intensity of the neighbor's look felt like a déjà vu. I nodded. Sure, we can eat first. I will serve the food. I guarantee you have not had this before. The neighbor looked at him with a big, warm smile. For the first time since meeting him, the neighbor seemed genuine, kind even. I could feel the enthusiasm radiating from him. I smiled back. Sure thing. The wife walked to the dinner table, her boots not making a sound as she took her steps. When she arrived at the dinner table, she looked intently at the containers and immediately, yet slowly, began to remove the lid, one by one. I was ready to be blown away. Gold-flaked steak. But what lay in front of me was rather a disappointment compared to my expectation. The first dish was a brisket-type meat that seemed to have been slow-cooked for hours. The meat looked tender but seemed to have lost the shape of what it originally looked like. The second dish was some sort of stewed meat with raw onions on the side. The third dish was a sausage, a single piece of sausage that was boiled, not grilled. All in all, the food did not look too appetizing to me. Here, try them. I guarantee you have not tried this meat before. The other Steve repeated himself. I nodded awkwardly and sat down. I looked back at the neighbors. They were standing still, their eyes fixated on the brisket meat that was on my fork. I did not feel too great. Hey, you guys can sit down. Don't just stand there. The couple did not move an inch. They continued to stare at me. I took a bite. It tasted like meat. There was not much flavor, but was not bad either. But as I was chewing, I noticed the couple was standing closer and closer to me, until they were right next to me, staring intently, passionately, deftly. I thought they were looking at the meat, but I was mistaken. They were looking at me, but not at my face. They were looking into my body, my flesh. The meat suddenly tasted putrid. I spit them by reflex. The couple was still looking at me, but this time I swear they were glaring. Their faces did not move, but their hands were shaking. Ever so slightly. So slightly. I did not know what came over me, but I suddenly yelled out, "Get out! I don't want you here." The couple did not seem startled. They stood still. I ran towards the door. I swung the door open and pointed at the front porch. "Get the hell out of my house now." The couple looked at one another, then nodded. Slowly but gracefully, they'd put the lids on the containers, then placed them back in the side bag. They stared at me once, for long, excruciating 15 seconds. Then they began to walk, and walked out of the house. Once I saw that they went back to their house, I ran into the washroom and brushed my teeth vigorously. My instinct told me what was in those containers was something no human was ever supposed to taste. I had no evidence to support any of this, but I could not brush past the gut feeling that was enveloping me. That whole night, I tumbled around, thoughts racing in my mind. Do I call the police about this? But where was the proof? I did not know what the right solution was, and I felt so alone. So alone. In the midst of the night, I peered at the neighbor's house. It was dark tonight, dark like any other house. This gave me a little comfort, that maybe I was just imagining things, that today was just an odd day. Suddenly, the lights flashed in the house, blinking twice. Then darkness, then silence.